Well, welcome back to the Pig Trail Show. As you can see, we have our Kevin McPherson joining us to talk a little bit more basketball. And Kevin, let's start with that OU game, the first loss for the Razorbacks this season. And it was one I was there back on the baseline filming, watching in person. I know that you were watching it back home as well. And clearly, Oklahoma, the more physical team yesterday, especially down low to me. What were some things that you picked up on when you were watching it that the Hogs need to work on this week?
Well, I think it's a lot of things that Arkansas need to work on in the summer, the training camp leading up to the season, and that began in early November in earnest. And even though Arkansas started out 9-0, you could see the problem areas. Look, Arkansas got outplayed. Arkansas got outcoached on Saturday. It was more than the players' fault. I think as a complete team, that's coaches, players, all of it. Arkansas was inferior on that day. One game. You can have a bad game. Oklahoma came in as one of the best field goal shooting teams in the country. That means inside the arc and out. And they had their way at both ends of the floor for most of that game. When you talk about offensively, whether it was inside the arc, behind the three-point line, Arkansas's really struggled there through the season. 13 of 22 for the Sooners. You're not going to win many games against anybody when the other team shoots that well, but especially another high major opponent on a neutral court. And you talked about the physicality. Arkansas had not lost a rebounding battle. They were -7 yesterday. And where that really showed up for a team that has struggled offensively shooting the three for the Hogs is their offensive rebounding kept them in games and put them over the top so many times, getting putbacks, getting to the free throw line. That just didn't happen in not enough for the Razorbacks on Saturday. Oklahoma, like I said, +7 on the boards. Arkansas was +4 on offensive rebounding, but only +4 in putbacks and scored fewer than 10 points on second chance points. If you're not a good three-point shooting team, the other team's lighting it up, you got to find ways to balance that. The other thing is coming into that game, Oklahoma had shot roughly half the free throws on the season that Arkansas had. That's been another big, important part of what Arkansas does to generate offense is get to that free throw line. They were unable to do that at the same level that Oklahoma did. So Oklahoma won all phases on offense. They were the better defensive team. When you really look at it, Arkansas only had 10 assists. Oklahoma forced 14 turnovers. And Arkansas has also been just dominant scoring in the paint relative to its competition. Oklahoma was even +2 in that category. So when the competition level stays up and you play away from home, you learn some things about yourself. And I think this Arkansas team learned that those preseason rankings, top 15, top 16, moving to that top 10, I think there are so many things to be worked on. They haven't really looked like that level of team yet, even in some of their wins. And then on Saturday, they certainly didn't look like it. And this is a kind of setback that can be good, though. It's only one game. It counts as one loss, Alyssa. I don't want to be overstating the obvious, but Arkansas had some blowout losses last year and righted the ship and ended up becoming a legitimate top 10 team and proved it with an Elite Eight run. So you can learn a lot from this, including the coaches. I think I said it on my radio show before Arkansas lost this game just 2 days ago here in Central Arkansas that I didn't think that the personnel rotations were quite where they needed to be for Arkansas to be its best version of itself. I still believe that. Specifically, two guys named Robinson I think could help this team with more meaningful roles. KK Robinson and Jackson Robinson, the duo sophomores that are perimeter players.
Yeah.
We'll see if things change with those guys, if they're going to get more minutes, bigger roles. I know Mussman was displeased and talked about that in his post-game press conference with players, but he might want to take a look in the mirror as well and some of the things that the coaching staff can do to help this team improve. They did it last year. Yeah. There's plenty of time to get it turned around and do it again this season.
Absolutely. And you just said what I was going to ask you. In KK Robinson, you have Jackson Robinson, you even have Trey Wade. I mean, at what point were you surprised that Muss didn't try to sub more? Because when you're not getting a lot going offensively, why not try some other rotations to see if something sparks?
Well, first of all, you can have a bad game, and you can look at the record and say, well, they were 9-0, they had a bad game. You don't just reinvent everything because of one bad game. But honestly, we've seen some of the problem areas for this team, and some of them are glaring. 3-point shooting, 3-point defense, and those things are going to be the kind of things that bite you when the level of competition goes up. And when you get in that 18-game SEC slate, it's every night out. You can't afford to be that bad and have those big of discrepancies unless you're dominating other phases, and you're not going to dominate. The margins are going to shrink against better competition where the athleticism, the depth, and the talent matches you. So
Yeah,
you've got to get better in those areas. So yeah,
yeah.
some of those personnel tweaks are probably in order to see if they can get things to work a little bit better in the areas that are glaring problems.
Sure. I guess what I'm saying is I don't think that you're completely reinventing anything if you put KK or Jackson or Trey Wade in there, because those are guys who have given you minutes in the past.
Right, and that's my point. I don't think making the point is that you are reinventing anything.
Hmm.
You brought these guys in for a reason because you think you can help your program. So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Musselman, this is his team. It's his vision. It's one game.
Yeah.
At the same time, we've seen some of these problem areas. It's worth repeating because it's not like it just happened on one day and in a bad game. You could kind of see some lead up to some of the issues. But Eric Musselman is one of the best guys that figures things out on the fly that I've seen, whether it's in game, in week preparation. Arkansas had plenty of days to prepare for a team that they knew what the strengths were, and they still failed on many levels. And that's why I said it reaches beyond just players. It's the coaching staff too. Everybody's accountable on this one. And look, again, one game, so you don't want to
Yep.
overblow it. And it's a chance to learn before you get into SEC play. Because you've now felt that pain. You've got the sting. It's almost like a bad sunburn, that first hot shower. It's going to hurt, but you learn from it and you get better. And I think Arkansas has a great opportunity to bounce back with two more games in North Little Rock, in a week, and then Elon to wrap up non-conference play before you get an SEC play. And by the end of the month, they go to Mississippi State, which is a good team. So Arkansas has got a chance to fix some things before that game.
Yeah, a good reminder for fans who may be panicking a little bit after this game. One, it's one game. I know it was a 22-point loss, but you have to remember this is a team last year, like you said. You start off SEC play, you lose to Missouri, you lose to LSU badly, and you lose to Alabama badly, and then they finally got things going and started rolling. So it takes sometimes a loss like this to kind of, have a gut punch and turn things around. Obviously, you mentioned up next is their game in North Little Rock. And so that should be fun against Hofstra, an opportunity to bounce back. And Devo Davis said this yesterday after his press conference. I want a hard week of practice. They've got all week to practice for this next game, and you know that they're going to definitely get to work. All right, let's talk about a guy that you've seen in action a couple of times, a guy a lot of Hog fans are really excited to get to the Hill, and that's Nick Smith Jr.
Well, you and I had the pleasure of sitting down with him for a lengthy interview earlier in the week, and we talked about his alpha and being a five-star. Sports Illustrated this last week, it just came out. He's a top 5 rated player according to Sports Illustrated, number 3 in the country. The ESPN ranking in number 6 wasn't good enough, right? This guy continues to climb, and then he goes and backs it up, Alyssa. After our interview on Saturday, just a couple of days later, in Memphis, a neutral site, he goes up. North Little Rock and Nick Smith Jr. take on one of the top 10 ranked teams in the country, Richardson, Texas, that has a couple of really highly rated players that are backcourt players. You look at Cason Wallace, a 5-star that has signed with Kentucky, a player that is considered a defensive whiz in the backcourt. Rylan Griffin, another top-level guy that's on his way to Alabama in that class of 2022. She had 2 top-rated guards, and Nick Smith Jr. goes out and hangs a 30-piece, drops that 30 bomb, 30 points in a 14-point win for North Little Rock over a 10th, top 10 team in the high school rank. So Nick Smith Jr. continues to back it up. He's been outstanding this season. And what I love about his game, I want to say it again, he can go get the points, but he can set the table for everybody else. And so you pick your poison with him. And beyond that, he always plays hard. He plays to win, and he plays hard. It's just a combination of things I think is culminating in why he is rated so highly. I think he's the top combo guard in the country, regardless of class. He's arguably the top player in the country, but I think definitely the top playmaker when you look at scoring, facilitating, everything that he does. He plays so hard, like I said, and it makes such an impact on wins and losses. This guy is the best playmaker, I think, in the nation, regardless of class. Arkansas has a gem in Nick Smith Jr.
Well, I'm looking forward, I know a lot of Hog fans are, to get him on the Hill. And good news for Arkansas fans, we've got Nick Smith Jr. joining Kevin McPherson and I coming up after the break. Kevin, thank you so much for the time.
Good to be with you guys, Alyssa. Thank you.